Hello and a warm welcome to the Irish Angle. We're back again this week, but we've no Emma Nagle. She went over to see her beloved Liverpool trash Man City 2-0 yesterday. So she's not with us, but I've got Johnny Ward here, so the two of us will go through all the stuff that happened last week. Johnny, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Vinny. Yeah, Emma picked a good day to go to Anfield, to be fair.
She did, yeah. Her team are flying, aren't they? Poor old Man City can't get a win. Doesn't matter what they do. Right. Starting off, we've lots of stuff to go through. The big story from the weekend, for me at least, was Jack Kennedy. He's out again with a broken leg. Sixth broken leg in 8 seasons. It's astonishing, Johnny, isn't it? The bad luck this lad has had.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose after a while you do wonder how much of it is bad luck because, like, Jack's just had, he's had these injuries so often now. You wonder, is he a little bit prone to them? And I mean, I've no idea medically at all, but he obviously does have to, and I'm sure he's done this before, Jack. Um, I've texted him on occasion before, just after an incident like this, saying, keep the head up, and you'll be back stronger than ever. But this time you're kind of like, what do you say to somebody at this stage? Like, it's an incredible run of luck, and he does have to get proper medical advice as to whether whether it's out and out bad luck or whether there's something more to it. Because I mean, it's not good for a human being of his age to have had all of these injuries. I mean, you have to think of Jack's long-term future as well. I'm sure all Jack cares about essentially is riding horses, but like any doctor, anyone who has any ounce of medical nous will tell you, like, this is not good for your body to have all these broken legs long term. Jack is very, very young. I'm 42, and I can feel my body is slowing down and creaking a lot at 42, and having done limited enough exercise throughout my life. But even, I feel from playing Astro and stuff like that, I feel like you get slower as you go on. You look at the likes of Paul Carberry and some other jockeys, how difficult it is for them post injuries. Paul Carberry, a lot of injuries as well. And Jack definitely needs to get good advice on this going forward, because long term, these injuries are just not good for him at all.
I know myself, you see a lot of the trainers around at the races, an awful lot of them have limps. The ones who used to ride horses, you see them limping around all the time. I'd say the majority have something wrong with them long term after riding. So poor old Jack, I tell you, he's got a hard life ahead of him when he gives up the saddle, whenever that turns out to be, because six broken legs on top of a number of collarbone issues he had as well. He was having real trouble with the collarbone there for a couple of years too. He broke it several times. I think he took time out one summer to try and get it fixed as well. But yeah, it's difficult. Look, hopefully he does come back as strong as ever, but he's going to be out for the rest of this season, which is a sad thing.
It is a sad thing, Vinny. Like, and Jack had such an. I mean, I still, it's etched in my memory, him going to Downpatrick for 7 rides at the end of last season, just before Punchtown, when the man could barely walk. And you might remember he was actually he got through Punchestown to the extent that, so he got to the end of the week anyway, and then he was basically, I think he was in a boot afterwards, even though he had been riding in the intervening period. So that's how much he wanted the title. But and I'm sure Jack has been riding horses since he was so young. And I do remember when Seamus Coleman had that awful injury against Wales. I remember being called out by somebody for suggesting Seamus Coleman's pace would be gone afterwards, where it was pointed out to me that as much as the injury looked, I mean, his leg had practically snapped in two, as much as it looked horrific, actually, there was a good chance he'd recover from that, and he did. So, like, I don't know enough about, Jack Kennedy's injuries to say. Maybe it's just you get up, you go again, you get up, you go again, you get up, you go again. But he definitely needs the top level medical advice on this.
I'm sure he's getting that now, but I'd say his legs, both legs, are probably full of pins and bars and God knows what at this stage. So it can't be easy for those surgeons trying to deal with this when they're going in. It must be like Spaghetti Junction going in to see his legs again. Anyway, moving on from poor old Jack, we had Shark Hanlon announced a funny one in my opinion. Tara Lee Cogan is going to take over his license while he's suspended. Shark is going off to America on holidays. And Tara Lee hasn't had a winner for 6.5 years. She's now going to be presumably training Hewick to win a King George. What do you make of that, Johnny?
Yeah, like, I suppose there are a lot of these trainers in Ireland that you see, you see the names. You might come across them the odd time at the races, but I don't know much about Charlie Cogan. It's like when Katie Brown took over the training of the horses trained by Rowan McNally. She was a fairly obscure selection, but I guess you have to have a trainer who I suppose is willing to accept the responsibility in kind of unusual circumstances of taking over high profile horses. I don't know what this entails in terms of the training of the horse. she's a friend not too far from me, and she's moving into my yard. That's what Shark said. Maybe they'll get on well together. I don't know what it is, but the weird thing about these suspensions in racing is that, I mean, there's only so far, I suppose, the authorities can go. But maybe Tara Lee will train a Grade 1 winner. Who knows?
Yeah, what's somewhat interesting here is I presume it must have something to do with the fact that the trainers themselves, they're afraid to let some big name come in and take the horses because they're afraid they mightn't get them back, I presume. Like you look at Gordon Elliott, when he went, he put in Denise Foster. When Tony Martin was out, he brought his sister in. Charles Burns brought his son in. Like they're not to it into getting someone else coming in or a big name coming into the yard, because I presume there must be issues around that somewhere along the line. But anyway, moving on. The withdrawals in Thurles last Thursday caused a bit of controversy, particularly the timing of them, because they all happened shortly before the first race. The crowd were in to see a decent looking card midweek in Thurles, nice national hunt track for national hunt racing, and then all of a sudden Willie took out 9 of his 10 runners. There were 17 runners in total. We ended up with a 2-runner race, a 3-runner race, a 40-1 on favourite. What did you make of that, Johnny?
Yeah, so this was extraordinary. I mean, I was trying to think, Vinny, have I ever seen a horse in Ireland shorter than 1-40? And to be backing a horse at 1-40 in a race in which it's go over fences for nearly 3 miles, and you have to beat a horse who does have a bit of ability, I was just trying to think, what's the odds of a horse completely, like, either missing a fence in a schooling session or having just a complete off day and losing. And I can tell you, the bookmakers tell you at the track they don't lay the short prices. I highly doubt they laid any of the 1-40 anyway. So I think they're probably laying the second favourite in that race. But just over the weekend, we've had the election in Ireland. The Green Party was practically wiped out, where the Green Party got 1 seat. I don't take any pleasure from that. I think the anger towards the Green Party is a disgrace in many sections. And I know a lot of people in rural Ireland think the Greens are a joke, but the Greens are trying to do the right thing as far as I'm concerned. And I didn't take any pleasure in their demise. But when we're dealing with the climate crisis, there are 2 ways of thinking here. You try to limit the climate crisis, which is looking increasingly impossible, or you're trying to deal with what's coming down the tracks. And I have a feeling in Ireland that we don't have the infrastructure at all to deal with the flooding and all of that we saw. And over last winter, when the rain was that bad, I was really worried about even racing this summer. Would we ever get any bit of dry conditions? But lo and behold, in November, and it's coming into November, we've had an incredibly dry spell. And Kate Maloney in Thurles was saying she'd never seen anything like it. But it sounds like Thurles, which is obviously kind of used to be known as Ireland's all-weather track, it sounds like Thurles aren't really prepared for the climate crisis because they don't have an ability to water, it seems. And that's why basically the races, the 2 meetings scratched. And you had Thurles must be under a lot of pressure to get these meetings going ahead, because when you lose a meeting, it's massive money loss. And racecourses are under big pressure down the line in terms of income. But if Thurles doesn't have an ability to water, given the utterly erratic nature of our climate now, and that is going to be a big problem. And I never thought I'd be saying this earlier in the year, that Thurles was calling off races because the ground was too hard, and wasn't alone in that either. But that's the climate crisis. It's really unpredictable. It's hard to know what to expect. And Thurles will have to look at this going forward, because practically all racetracks have some ability to water, and if Thurles don't, they're going to have problems.
Yeah, I agree. That's the issue, isn't it? It's the expense of it as well. But anyway, that's going to be for everyone going forward by the sound of it. Sticking with the ground, another one here. This is interesting. Anyway, a horse called Cocktail Brute won a bumper in Fairyhouse yesterday on the very same ground that it was withdrawn from on Saturday. It was due to run Saturday. Gordon Elliott took the horse out because he said the ground was unsuitable. And then he runs it on the exact same ground conditions, or official ground condition, on Sunday, and it hacks up. Now, he says, in fairness to him, that he walked the bumper track on Sunday, and it's a different track to the one that was used on Saturday, even though the ground description is the same, and he felt it was softer and more suitable for his horse. But yet he took out another one that was declared in that particular race as well on Sunday. But what do you make of that, Johnny? Same ground, and yet one day we can be told you can run it, the next day you can't.
Yeah, I suppose if you're being extremely pernickety about it, it's probably slightly different ground over 24 hours later with the weather and all of that. But I mean, a lot of the, you go racing some days, and this has been like, and I'm not suggesting this with Gordon Elliott or Jigginstown, although Jigginstown did have a habit of pulling out horses, their second strings a lot over the years, and it is what it is. Like, it's a benign kind of way of dealing with the rules, I suppose. But I'd go racing some days, and I'd be expecting a spading on runners because of the ground, but none would come in, and there'd all be like a litany of reasons as to why these horses were pulled out. And loads of horses suddenly found a stone to stand on. Loads of horses inexplicably were coughing, and because the rules wouldn't really allow you to change, and because the ground hadn't officially changed or the rain hadn't come that they anticipated, the trainers themselves couldn't feel that they could scratch the horse, because within the rules they actually couldn't do that. And you get, I mean, we've had high profile examples of a horse that we will be talking about scratched late on, recent times, and it's frustrating. But I don't know. Maybe Gordon is right what he says, but I have to say I do find late horses being scratched consistently. I find that quite frustrating when you build up a race. It messes up with the betting. It can be really problematic for bookmakers as well. And bear in mind, bookmakers are becoming less and less interested in horse racing, and when they get horses scratched, it messes up their book. You often get Rule 4 jobs as well, where you have two even money favourites, and the rules are kind of anachronistic to deal with it. So I don't know. I mean, Gordon could well be completely right with what he's saying about this, but yeah, it is a bit of an odd one.
Yeah, it's very hard on punters as well, isn't it? If you're
It
you're in a
is.
dairy house on Sunday and you're waiting on the bumper and you see, oh look, this horse he couldn't go on the ground yesterday. It's the same
Exactly.
ground today. Surely he won't win. He drifts some evens out to 15th eight and he hacks them.
Yeah.
So it's a difficult situation. Anyway, talking about betting, we've got the Gambling Commission in the UK have come out with the latest figures for turnover on horse racing, and they're down 28% in 3 years. This is a worry, Johnny, isn't it? Particularly as we've media rights payments in Ireland are now linked to betting turnover. So that's not a good sign, is it?
No, this is, I suppose, this is racing has to deal with climate change, but in terms of the climate change reality for us in life trying to deal with it, this is almost the equivalent of racing. How damaging this is. This is really, really alarming stuff. And I know this anecdotally, Vinny, like from I see the demise of betting shops. I'm very sad about that. I made great friends in the betting shop, but the internet came in, it's ruined newspapers as well, it's made, it's done a lot of good for life and all that. It's done a lot of good, but the internet has played a massive role in people changing their habits. And the betting shops on the way down, but you wouldn't have felt that, the ease of betting on racing on your phone. You wouldn't have felt that we'd have any sort of a alarm in terms of turnover, but here we are, and these figures are staggering. They don't actually surprise me, because we had the levy board telling us recently, I think, that betting was down 20% in 2 years in Britain. Like that's a staggering drop. I'd imagine, and I'm speculating here, there are three or four particular reasons. Affordability checks, I can absolutely attest to this. Like I've had accounts closed, and I've had, once you start looking for your bank details and all of that, I have no interest in that whatsoever. I try not to look at my own bank details, not to mind somebody else. So then you obviously have that. You had with the betting exchanges, you had premium charges come in and stuff like that. You also had a bit of a cost of living crisis in Britain. Like, there are a lot of people in Britain don't have that much money day to day. There's a lot of poverty in Britain now, and I think you see that in racecourse attendance as well. People can't afford to go racing. There's been a lot of controversy about Cheltenham. But fourthly, and I firmly believe this to be the fact, I'm going to try to write an article on this in the near future. And bookmakers are not that bothered about horse racing anymore. Bookmakers couldn't survive without racing. It was all they took bets on for years and years and years. Racing can't survive without bookmakers. Bookmakers could absolutely happily, if racing fell apart in Britain and Ireland in the morning, it would barely have a dot, I'd say, in the Flutter share price, and that's the reality of it. And the betting per race course in Ireland, more and more going into the next few years, is entirely linked to the turnover per racetrack. So you see the likes of the Curragh will say have big fields. I think they have 20 grand minimum races. So the Curragh have I'd say the Curragh have tried to make the fields as big as possible. A lot of racetracks, it's been difficult for them. And if you have a lot of sort of small fields and short price favourites, that's not good for turnover. And this is going to have serious ramifications for the racetracks down the line. Like, closures are eminently possible in the next few years, and that'll be sad to see. But because we're linked to turnover so strongly, and turnover is falling off a cliff in Britain, we're in big trouble.
Yeah, when you look at Thurles, if you're talking about turnover, there's a track is going to suffer, isn't it? A 1 to 40 favourite. There's no one backing it. There's no turnover on that particular race for starters. So that's one down. They've also had a few meetings cancelled because of the weather as well, which doesn't help either. So yeah, I could see there's going to be problems going forward, no doubt about it. Anyway, We'll move on to bigger and brighter things. Last weekend's racing, we saw some cracking contests. The one that stuck out for me was Lossiemouth, who's now gone a short price favourite for the champion hurdle. What did you make of her, Johnny? She recovered well from her stone bruise. Anyway, only 7 days later, she's able to hack up in Fairy House.
Well, a stone bruise is quite a benign injury, Vinny. You know that now. So she was Punter certainly backed her as if stone bruise wasn't going to be an issue. But I have to now. I put up Tiopo in the Racing TV website. I felt you're looking at a horse like one of the better stayers of his generation. Arguably, he's a right good horse. Like and is versatile in regards to dropping back and trip to this race. And then kind of harden my attitude as I'd have this kind of contrarian attitude sometimes punting, which it's actually something that I have to say I've has really, really not paid off for me over the years, going against the market when in an instance like this now, it was kind of hard to call the market because like these horses haven't met each other before. And Tiopo, for all that he's an excellent horse, probably has his limitations. Lossiemouth hadn't really been asked this question before, so I wasn't really sure how the market would go, and it went one way. And I used to bet fairly heavily on the exchanges, and one thing that I learned, and I mean I learned this to a considerable personal cost in terms of my bank balance, like backing horses, doubling up on horses that drift is a terrible, terrible idea, like terrible idea. And I'd often go against the market, think I could beat the market, and you can't. But in this instance, despite the stone bruise and all of that, the market very much said, yeah, Lossiemouth. You watch the race then, and I was pretty happy. I didn't really feel Tiopo was necessarily traveling within his comfort zone, but he's probably more of a 3-miler. That's fine. And he was in a position. She made that mistake then, and she was quite keen as well. Like she was quite keen, and then like I just thought it was magic to watch. I wasn't at the race, unfortunately, but watching it on HD at home, and you see Paul Townend like just kind of basically like nurse her into the race, like kind of cajole her into the race, keep her on the bridle for as long. But I was like, Paul Townend is such a lovely, lovely rider on a horse. Like he never really goes for broke until it's the last possible minute. I think, what's he holding on to here? She's been quite keen, and she did make that mistake. Jesus, it was unbelievable, like what she did. Absolutely unbelievable. And you're thinking of like, what other sport could you have like the female competing against the male and ultimately getting £7? £7 is irrelevant. Like she would have beaten him hands down without £7. And then I started thinking the day of Dawn Run. And I was thinking, like, if Dawn Run had that stupid mare's option at Cheltenham, like nobody would have heard of her all these years later. She took on the lads, and at a time when Ireland was impoverished, like everyone was leaving the country. All we had was like sport to kind of keep us going, and other the few points or whatever. But Dawn Run like lifted a country in real economic bother, and Irish winners were rare at Cheltenham at that time. But for her to win those two races for Paddy Mullins, if that were the case today, with respect to Paddy Mullins, and imagine he would have gone the mayor's option. And now will we see brighter days ahead take on Lossiemouth at Cheltenham? Sure, maybe we won't, because she can go to the stupid mayor's race, and maybe she can go to the mayor's chase, go over fences, and stay to her own sex, because we didn't see Lossiemouth take on these horses until this time. And to see her absolutely laugh at Tiopo, the only thing that was missing was like a Paul Carberry-esque Paul Townend kind of, cajole him. Where are you? Like, come after me here. And the memorable best mate be for Salmon Day. That's not Paul Townend's style, but Jesus, he did everything else. He was just like, I can't believe what I'm doing here. It was an extraordinary performance. But can you imagine her taking on Constitution Hill and taking on the gelding? Because that's what national owned racing needs. It does not need mares races at Cheltenham. Mares races, for my mind, were designed to encourage people to buy mares so that they'd have a reasonable program, so that people just would buy mares and they wouldn't cost nothing. That's fine around Thurles and Clonmel. It's not around Cheltenham.
The only thing is, would Lossiemouth even be in training if there wasn't a mares program? The same with your honeysuckles and apples, jades, and all the rest of them that we've had over the last few years. Maybe we wouldn't see them. Maybe it'd be once in a generation when you get a Dawn Run coming through. But the majority of them, they just wouldn't bother putting them into training. So we mightn't have seen a Lossiemouth. And I'm glad we've seen her, because I think she could be really special after what we saw yesterday. Moving on to the same division, but what about Sir Gino? He wins very impressively. He goes towards the top of the market as well. They were talking about putting him over fences. Maybe they will again now that they see Lossiemouth's going to be a danger for the champion hurdle for Sir Gino. But he was very impressive as well. Was he in the fighting fifth, although Mystical Power didn't turn up on the day?
Yeah, that was the thing, Vinny. Like, and I know Tanya Stevenson was quite sweet and lump sum in the preview as well, and we had a good race at the prices. But this race was disappointing in that we 2 non-runners reduced it to 7, which really doesn't help turnover at all. And we've had, like, even though the hurling and chase division at the top level, it's so kind of spread out now that horses can avoid each other. We still have had 3 really good sort of match races in general, like 3 really, really good match races on paper in recent times, and this was going to be one of them. Which are Mystical Power. I mean, fairness to the horse, he's never really run a bad race in his life, but he had an off day. So what Sir Gino achieved is kind of hard to know. He beat Lump Sum doing handstands as you would expect. But like, these are horses that wouldn't be mapped in a champion hurdle. For all of that, Vinny, like, I do wonder about this horse. He's 4 years of age. He's so much of ability. Connections obviously can run State Man in the champion hurdle, who looks very, very vulnerable now. So what they do with Sir Gino, I don't know. It's a difficult question for them, really. You know, he's only 4, and going chasing it as a 5-year-old wouldn't be the worst idea at all. And remember, like, he smashed Cargese at Aintree last year as well. He's a very, very good horse. But it's hard to say, like, he didn't beat Tiopu doing handstands as Lossiemouth did, I suppose. But I don't know. I'm a massive fan of Sir Gino. I've gone on about that Birthday Road for him, how he made him look second rate. And Birthday Road's a very good horse. So, yeah, it'd be some crack if they all rocked up in the champion hurdle.
Well, that's the thing. Who will rock up in the champion hurdle at this stage? Like, you'd have to say Lossiemouth, almost certain to go. Stateman, almost certain to go. The brighter days ahead, will that go the other way? Go for the mare's race instead? Now that doesn't have to take on Lossiemouth in the mare's race, it'd be a shoe in there. You've got Sir Gino maybe go over fences, potentially, because he's in the same ownership as Stateman. You have Constitution Hill. He has to be a big doubt, does he, at this stage? We need to see him on a racetrack at some stage. So I don't know. I don't know what will run. I think 7-4 Lossiemouth mightn't be the worst price in the world at this minute in time. Though I don't tend to get involved in that anti-post stuff, certainly not at this stage. Anyway, other things we saw last week. Impere Pass made a debut over fences and won. And then we had Caldwell Potter yesterday. 740,000 he cost in that dispersal sale out of Gordon's, gone to Paul Nicholls. He didn't race him last season, but he's got 8,169 quid back. He only needs to win 80 more of those races to get back the money they paid for him at the sales. What do you make of all that, Johnny?
Yeah, I suppose starting with Imperi Passe again, going on to back and horse at short prices, like 2-13 in a novice chase over 2 miles 5s. It is kind of mad that people don't back these horses on course. So the money's kind of it's pretty much all on the exchanges. Like, they might put them in accumulators, but it was a hell of a strong market. I'm not saying you make money laying them or whatever. I'd say if you saw him turning in, you'd be thinking, oh, I've a fair old chance here. But he ends up winning by 12 lengths. It jumped kind of slightly to his left. I thought he was good by and large. Looked quite professional. He's a horse with a lot of ability. The Caldwell Potter thing, I mean, the first thing is that whole Caldwell story is still so mystifying, how these horses just ended up being sold so radically and all of that, after having obviously a couple of bad days at the racetracks, so to speak. But when this horse bought for all that money, like, and I've said this on the show before, like, I could not get over Paul Nicholls saying he needed to acclimatise before running at Cheltenham. I was like, you paid all this money for a horse and you won't run him at Cheltenham, and you're Paul Nicholls. And I actually met him at the Punchdown Festival and we had a bit of a laugh about it. But he's interesting, just the rider saying afterwards that the ground can't be soft enough for this horse. So that just might be something to bear in mind going forward, that he might be slightly vulnerable on good ground, but you can see this horse is a serious engine. I know his former trainer absolutely loved him, and let's just hope Paul Nicholls, has campaigned relatively aggressively, because why would you pay all the money for this horse if you don't want him to go to Cheltenham?
Yeah, true. He has to go to Cheltenham. I think that's the whole point, isn't it? What else would you be spending that money for? Anyway, over last week, give me a horse to follow. What stuck out to you more than anything else?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many you could pick here. Just going through this, I ended up going with Anzadam in the grade 3 hurdle for 4-year-olds on Saturday. It was an interesting market initially, because he'd gone out to 4-1, I think. And if you're kind of a relatively small puncher, you can get plenty of value early on in the day. Now, this horse he opened up 7-2 on track, so it was easy to back. Bottler Secret, who had come in, then went well out in the betting. I had major concerns about him. I put him up now strongly enough. I was happy to give him the benefit of the doubt over Cheltenham, but he may not be training on. He's not the biggest horse in the world. This was very disappointing. I don't know, maybe he wants kind of deeper ground, but like, he was whatever about Cheltenham, like, he faded like a light here after that mistake. It was the second last. And it's kind of hard to know where he's going. But Calaconte was second. Calaconte had a very good run, the handicap, obviously, the day before, winning up to 138. And Anzadam Paul Townend glowing afterwards about how hard it was to pull him up. I thought this was a cracking performance. He's obviously in the right stable as well.
I'd agree with you. Yeah, that's definitely a horse to follow, because I like the second horse, Calaconte. I thought that was a handicap blot when it won the previous day. That's definitely a graded performer anyway. So Anzadam could be very good. The one I liked from last week is one in the UK, the Jukebox Man. Harry Redknapp and Ben Pauling. This horse had very good form. It was an Irish point-to-point winner. Was beaten ahead by Stellar Story in the Albert Bartlett last year. Then went to Aintree, so it danced every dance, all the big meetings. Second there to Dancing City. And then it comes out and wins on its Novice Chase debut the other day. Jumped a little bit left and was hanging a bit left. You wouldn't mind that too much. First run over fences since its point-to-point days. But I think that's one to follow, the Jukebox Man. I'd say it could pick up plenty of prizes in the UK before we get to the big festivals in the spring. So that's more or less it for today, Johnny. Thanks for coming along and chatting to me about all the big topics. And we'll have Emma Nagel back next week. If you want to tune in, and make sure to subscribe to our channel, so you can do that below. And make sure you do gamble responsibly if you're having any bets. And we'll see you all again next week. Bye for now.